I'm Tracy. It was a Monday morning, and I was sitting in the conference room on the 4th floor, waiting for the representatives of Zenith Innovations. The room was windowless, soundproofed, and lit by harsh fluorescent strips, more like an interrogation room than a meeting space. At 9 a.m. Sharp, the door opened. Mr. Harris, the building manager, walked in first, looking relieved that I was taking the lead. Then came Mr. Clark, the lawyer, looking exhausted. Next was Mr. Thompson, the vice president of Zenith Innovations and the father of Ryan, the young man who had caused all the trouble. He was a short, bald man with steely eyes and wore a suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. Finally, Ryan trailed in. He looked like a beaten dog, but I knew he was still capable of biting if given the chance. They sat down on one side of the table, and I sat on the other, alone. Mr. Thompson started, his voice gravelly. Let's cut to the chase. We're losing $50,000 an hour. My son made a mistake. He thought you were support staff. He was stressed. We apologize. He nudged Ryan, who looked at the table and mumbled, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have fired you. Can we just turn the internet back on now? I looked at Ryan and then at Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, your son didn't just mistake me. He publicly humiliated the person responsible for the structural integrity of your business. But that's personal. I can get over that. The problem is strictly professional. I opened my folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is the renewal contract for the infrastructure. Mr. Thompson reached for it. Fine, we'll sign it. Same terms? I pulled the paper back slightly. No, this is the voided contract. Mr. Clark looked confused. Excuse me? As of Friday evening, I said, the bandwidth allocation previously reserved for Zenith Innovations was released to the open market. It has been purchased. Mr. Thompson's eyes widened. Purchased? By whom? Novatech, I replied. Mr. Thompson slammed his hand on the table. Novatech? The guys across the street. You sold our fiber to our competitors. I corrected him. I sold my fiber to a paying client with a signed contract. You didn't have a contract, Mr. Thompson, just a handshake and a renewal that your representative threw in my face. He commanded, undo it. Cancel their deal. Give it back to us. We'll pay double. I shook my head. I can't. It's a 5-year binding agreement. Penalties for breach are astronomical. Besides, they're already using it. Their traffic is live. Ryan piped up, his voice cracking. So, what are you saying? We just don't have internet? I said, you have the base building internet, DSL speeds. Good for email, bad for whatever it is you do, visionary ops, I believe. Ryan shouted, we can't run the platform on DSL. I replied coldly, then I suggest you relocate. Because this building can no longer support your needs. Mr. Thompson stared at me, then at his son and the lawyer. He finally realized the magnitude of the screw-up. You're evicting us, he whispered. Without serving an eviction notice, you're starving us out. I stood up. I'm just the landlord. I just provide the walls. What you do inside them is up to you. But if you want cooling, power, and data, you need a friend in infrastructure, and you don't have one anymore. I walked to the door. Oh, and Ryan, the freight elevator is booked tomorrow. Novatech is moving in their new server racks. You'll have to wait until Wednesday to move your things out. I'd suggest using the stairs. As I watched their strategic relocation on the security monitors on Wednesday, I couldn't help but think back to how it all started. I was sitting at the conference table on the 37th floor, poring over a complex schematic for a Phase 3 fiber optic route. I had designed, negotiated, and leased this infrastructure to Zenith Innovations 3 years ago. It was a delicate ecosystem of power and glass, crucial for the 37th floor to survive the upcoming summer heat wave. Suddenly, I heard the distinctive sound of a snapping finger. "Hey, IT girl." "Earth to IT girl," a voice drawled. I didn't look up immediately. The fingers snapped again, faster, like a metronome for an idiot. I finally turned my swivel chair to see Ryan. He was 24, from a wealthy family. His father, Mr. Thompson, was the vice president of the holding company, which is why Ryan held the title of Director of Visionary Ops, even though he didn't seem to know much about the actual operations. He wore a designer jacket that cost more than my first car. "Can I help you, Ryan?" I asked. He gestured wildly at the glass-walled conference room behind him, where 5 other guys in similar jackets were staring at a frozen Zoom screen. "The Wi-Fi is lagging. We're pitching to the Series B investors in 3 minutes. Fix it." I took a slow breath. I was a professional in a tailored blazer, not a help desk staffer. "I'm not IT, Ryan. I'm reviewing the infrastructure specs for the renewal. If you're having latency issues, you need to submit a ticket to the portal." Ryan laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Excuse me, I don't submit tickets. I tell people to do their jobs. You're sitting here with a laptop. Fix the router. Reboot the whatever. Just make the internet work." I said, "I'm busy," and turned back to the schematic. "And I don't have admin access to your local network." That was the wrong thing to say. Ryan slammed his hand down on the table, rattling my coffee cup. The entire open plan office went silent. "You know what?" he shouted, his face flushing red. "I'm sick of the attitude from the support staff in this building. My father pays a fortune for this lease. I can't even get a stable connection. You're useless. You're actually useless." He pointed at the door. "Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I'll have HR send your final check. Go." I froze, not out of fear but out of disbelief. He actually thought he had the authority to fire me. I looked at him, at the silent office watching us, and at the folder under my hand, which contained the lease renewal addendum. "You're firing me?" I asked just to have it on the record. "I'm firing you," he spat. "Get your things and get out now." I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Zenith Innovations but the independent infrastructure overseer for the entire Skyline Tower. I simply closed my laptop, capped my pen, and picked up my leather folio, leaving the unsigned renewal contract on the table. "Understood," I said calmly. "Good luck with the Series B pitch, Ryan." I walked to the elevator, feeling the eyes of everyone on my back. I didn't rush. I pressed the button, waited for the chime, and stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw Ryan smugly high-fiving one of his jacket-wearing buddies, thinking he had asserted dominance. Little did he know, he had just severed the artery keeping his business alive. The elevator ride down to the lobby was smooth. Skyline Tower prided itself on its high-speed, whisper-quiet elevators, which I knew were serviced weekly because I signed the vendor invoices. I stepped out into the lobby, the cool air conditioning hitting my face, and nodded to the security chief, Mr. Brown. "Afternoon, Miss Tracy," Mr. Brown grunted. "Everything good on 37? "Not anymore, Mr. Brown," I said, offering a tight smile. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across the street, sipping a double espresso. I knew what was about to happen upstairs. Mr. Harris, the building manager, walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 37th floor. He was a good man in his 58s, always wearing suits that were a bit too large for him and sweating profusely when things went wrong. He was carrying a notary stamp and a bottle of champagne to celebrate the signing of the 10-year lease extension, a deal I had spent 6 months negotiating with Mr. Thompson. "Afternoon, gentlemen, Mr. Harris boomed, trying to be jovial. "Where is she? Where's Our Lady of the Hour? We've got ink to dry." Ryan spun around, looking annoyed. "Who?" "Tracy, Mr. Harris said, looking around the room. "She said she was setting up in here. We need to finalize the infrastructure agreement before 5 p.m. Or the grandfather clause on your cooling unit expires." Ryan scoffed, grabbing a can of energy drink from the mini fridge. "Oh, her. The brunette with the attitude. Yeah, I fired her." The room went silent. It was the kind of silence where the air seemed to be sucked out. The developers in the back row lowered their headphones. Ms. Davis, the HR director, who actually knew who I was but had been in the bathroom during the incident, walked in just in time to hear this. Her face went as white as paper. "Mr. Harris blinked and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I'm sorry, Ryan." "You did what?" "I fired her," Ryan said slowly, as if talking to a child. "She was incompetent. She couldn't fix the Wi-Fi. She gave me lip, so I told her to pack up and get out." "You're welcome. We need better vendors." Mr. Harris stared at him, at the empty chair where I had been sitting, and at the unsigned contract on the table. "Ryan, Tracy isn't a vendor. She's not IT. Tracy is the landlord, technically the independent infrastructure overseer and lease holder for the commercial zones. She owns the rights to the fiber trunk you use. She owns the lease on the backup generators. She holds the master agreement for this entire floor. I just manage the janitors. Ryan, she decides if this building has a pulse." Ryan laughed nervously. "You're joking." She was just looking at a laptop. "Mr. Harris yelled, she was rewriting your lease. You fired the person who was about to save you $2 million in retroactive utility fees." Ryan's smile faltered. He looked at the folder on the table, reached out, and flipped it open. There, on the first page in bold font, was the infrastructure reliance agreement prepared by Tracy L. Thompson, managing partner, Skyline Infrastructure Holdings. "Oh," Ryan said, a small, weak sound. "Mr. Harris asked." She walked out. "Did she say anything?" "She said, understood," Ryan mumbled. Mr. Harris closed his eyes. "Oh, God." She accepted the termination of the negotiation. "Ryan, you didn't fire an employee. You just terminated your own service contract." Back in my office on the 4th floor, I didn't feel angry. Anger is inefficient and messy. I felt a profound sense of obligation to the terms of the contract. Ryan had made it clear that he didn't want me there or my services. As a professional, I was bound to respect his wishes. I pulled out the Zenith Innovations binder from the shelf. It was 3 inches thick. I opened it to Section 14B, Revocable Privileges and Shared Utilities. Most tenants assumed that when they rented a floor, they got everything: water, power, internet, air. But Skyline Tower was an old building retrofitted for modern tech. The base lease covered 4 walls and a ceiling. Everything else, like high-speed fiber, the dedicated HVAC loop for the server room, and biometric security access, were add-on amenities, essentially sub-leases offered by the building management to tenants. Ryan had just fired the provider of those amenities. I opened the building management software. My access level was root administrator. Step 1, I changed the elevator priority protocol. Zenith Innovations had paid a premium for VIP lift access, which meant their keycards would prioritize an elevator in the lobby, shaving about 4 minutes off their morning commute. I found the clause stating that the contract status negotiation was terminated by the tenant and clicked the checkbox to revert to standard access. Now, they'd have to wait in line like the call center on the 8th floor. Step 2. I revoked the digital token for the freight elevator. I knew they had a shipment of new servers arriving on Tuesday because I had approved the dock schedule. Without the token, they'd have to carry those racks up 37 flights of fire stairs. Step 3. I adjusted the climate control. The building's central AC kept the offices at a comfortable 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but the server room generated massive heat and needed a dedicated chilled water loop. That loop was my property. I pulled up the HVAC schematic and changed the flow to Suite 3700 from high priority/subsidized to base building standard. The valve actuators on the roof would take about an hour to close, and by the next morning, their server room would be a sauna. My phone rang. It was the landline. Only 3 people had this number: the building owner, the fire marshal, and the head of legal for the property management firm. It was the legal counsel, Miss Green. Tracy, Miss Green's voice was tight. I just got a frantic call from Mr. Harris. He says the VP's kid fired you. He did, I said, putting the call on speaker while I navigated to the security badge database. He terminated our working relationship. Jesus, Ms. Green sighed. Okay. What are you doing? I'm adhering to the termination. I'm rolling back the uncontracted amenities. I can't provide services without a signed liability waiver. Ms. Green, you know the insurance rules. If his servers melt and I don't have a contract, I get sued. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking, how bad is it going to get? I looked at the monitor, hovering over the biometric bathroom locks tab. Well, I hope they like using the public restrooms in the lobby. Understood, Miss Green said. I'll draft the liability deflection. Have a good evening, Tracy. You too, Ms. Green, I said and pressed execute. On the 37th floor, the chaos began. Around 3:30 p.m. The smart glass in the executive conference room stopped responding and reverted to its transparent state. Ryan was in the middle of a private yelling match, and suddenly, the entire office could see him pacing and gesturing like a mime in a glass box. Then, the biometric locks failed. The interior doors of their suite, secured by fingerprint scanners routed through my local server, popped open and refused to latch. The exclusive executive wing was now open to everyone, and the noise from the sales floor flooded in. At 4:15 p.m. The real panic set in. My dashboard started receiving critical tenant tickets. The server room temperature was rising, the bathroom access was denied, and the internet was flickering with a 40% packet loss. Ryan had called me IT, but he didn't understand what it actually ran on. The fiber trunk they used was a split line, and without my prioritization code, their data packets were fighting for bandwidth with the dental call center on the 8th floor. My email pinged. It was from Ryan. Subject, glitch. Body, hey, the AC is acting up and the doors are weird. Can you take a look? Need it fixed ASAP. No apology, just a demand. He still thought I was the help desk. I didn't reply. I simply archived the email into a folder labeled Evidence of Unauthorized Service Requests. 5 minutes later, Mr. Harris called again. Tracy, he's screaming in the lobby. He says the building is attacking him. He's trying to get the maintenance guy, Mr. Smith, to hack the thermostat. I said calmly, Mr. Smith can't hack the thermostat. It's encrypted with a 256-bit key and hardwired into the lease logic controller. I know that, Mr. Harris said, but Ryan doesn't. He's threatening to sue the building for breach of habitable workspace. Let him. The lease guarantees a temperature of 74 degrees Fahrenheit for standard office space. It does not guarantee cooling for a high-density server farm. That was an addendum he didn't sign. He's asking for you, Mr. Harris said. He's asking where the hell the IT girl went. Tell him I've been terminated. As a non-employee, I'm not authorized to enter the premises. He's going to call his dad, Mr. Harris warned. I'm counting on it, I said. As the server room temperature reached 82 degrees Fahrenheit, the automated safety protocols kicked in. The servers began to throttle their CPU speed, and the Series B pitch deck they were trying to upload was moving at a snail's pace. I checked the freight elevator camera. A delivery guy was standing there with 10 boxes of pizza for the team working late. He swiped his card, but it was a red light both times. He shrugged, turned around, and left the pizzas with the front desk security. While Ryan was sweating through his jacket upstairs, I was straightening my blazer. I had a lunch meeting scheduled for the next day, but I decided to move it up to dinner. I walked across the street to the Grand Steakhouse, a place where the steaks were aged for weeks and the waiters knew your name. I was meeting Mr. Reed, the CEO of Novatech. Novatech was Zenith Innovation's direct competitor. They were a solid, unpretentious company that had been trying to get a foothold in Skyline Tower for 2 years. They were currently crammed into a sublet on the 12th floor, desperate for more bandwidth and better cooling for their expansion. Mr. Thompson had outbid them for the 37th floor 3 years ago. Mr. Reed stood up when I arrived. He was in his 52s, with silver hair.